G'day my Graveling Ghouls, it's me Mansant back at you with today's video where we take a look at the Blitz matchup versus Lexi. Now this Lexi build in particular is a Death Dealer Ice Lexi, which tends to be the more frequently found one because it's just so punishing against all of those red line aggro decks. Now overall, I do think this is a pretty good matchup for Levia. I always have pretty much never had an issue against Ranger as Levia, and that's mainly because Ranger has a lot of issues getting good pivot turns off with their armor. Now, normally when you say something like pivot turn with armor, that's when a deck can decide to use their armor to save cards in hand and yet still effectively block a decent chunk of the damage coming through so that they can keep a larger hand and have a good play back into you. Now, Ranger's a class that can't really do this because they have only a few blocks available to them. Normally, you'll really just see them block 2 with Perch Grapplers and then save New Horizon and Tunic for the very end of the game. Lexi overall is a deck that wants to keep around 3 cards in hand because they need something to pitch, an arrow to shoot, and something to fuse with. So at minimum around 3 cards. But if they can keep more in hand, they definitely want to because they always want to make sure that they're resetting that arsenal to keep getting you with that Frostbite token. Now overall what Lexi's trying to do into you is get a strong Dominate off with either a Weave Ice or Polar Blast play first, into a arrow, either Blizzard Bolt that's going to create a Frostbite every time it hits, or a Chilling Ice Vein, which is going to make you discard or pay 1 every time it hits. And I say every time it hits because their other big part of the combo here is Shock Charmers, where they can discard extra cards to let their arrows hit you an extra time and proc those hit effects all over again. Now, these combos do require a lot of cards in hand, so as long as you can keep matching pressure with Lexi, they don't really get to have these scary 5-card hands that often in the game because they just need to be blocking or they lose. Of course, one of the best ways to deal lots of damage into a deck like this and catch them on the awkward hands of a lot of 2 blocks is going to be your Blood Rush Bellow. This card you probably won't ever get to swing with Claws into an attack because of the taxes that Lexi will put on you, but even just swinging with a Claw into an attack is really strong in this matchup because of the lack of block that Lexi has. You can also pretty freely play through 1 Frostbite with cards like Hungering Slaughterbeast and Writhing Beast Hulk, but it is going to be a bit harder to play your 3 costs like the Endless Maws and the Deadwood Rumblers. But overall, this matchup really should feel good for you. Some of their discard effects can go your way, like with the Beast Withins, or letting yourself just like fill graveyard with some of your recursion pieces. And you do have a lot of blues, like I mentioned earlier. The other big thing into this matchup is that you have Carrion Husk. So when Lexi does play really greedy and keep a huge hand so that they can hopefully proc their Shock Charmers multiple times on you to shut you out, well, you have Carrion Husk, and because Lexi doesn't really have attack reactions, you will know the extent of the damage that the arrow can deal. So if you just cover it up perfectly, throw in your Carrion Husk, then all of a sudden they played really greedy and you punish them for it, and then you get to swing in with a really effective hand, and they will be hurting. So I keep saying it, I think Ranger's an easy matchup for Levia, so let's jump into the best of 3 and see how it went. Alrighties, and here we've got the gameplay in front of us. We've got the lovely Kaylin on the left, who used to be a Levia player actually, but she couldn't handle some of the variance that shows up in Levia games, so switched over to Lexi, and she's been doing very well in the deck, so happy that she found a hero she's enjoying here. So we saw the die roll there, and I did lose the die roll. Kaylin won, and has elected to go first. And for Ice Lexi, this is pretty potent because she's got a lot of dominate effects in the deck with Polar Blast and Weave Ice, which she actually has both of in hand. So going first normally means that they can guarantee a bit of damage, and if they can start the damage trade-off in their favor, plus Arsenal and Ice card, they are just looking very pretty to have that consistent Frostbite tax plus arrow hit effect for the rest of the game. And that's really how they maintain a lot of tempo. Because Ranger needs to be able to hold cards in hand to do everything they want, but if they can do everything they want, then your opponent is going to be taxed to high heavens. So they really just want those taxes to affect the game plan of the opponent. Otherwise, keeping all these cards just doesn't work out. They'll just be taking too much damage. So what we see here is a commitment to a 3 of a kind already, because on turn 1 here, knowing that Kaylin's got the Dominate with the Weave Ice, any arrow that comes in can actually just freely proc Shock Charmers multiple times over. So this is a really tough spot for myself here, especially with the hand that I've got, because not only can I only block with 1 card anyway because of the Dominate, but it is threatening to break Husk as well. only blocking with 3 means I'd be taking 5, and then Kaylin can just proc Shock Charmers twice to already break my Husk as early as my turn 0. I could also throw in Scabs here, but there is a potential that she can still break Husk if I do it that way. So now the question becomes, what do I block with? Because I'm definitely going to throw Husk in the way as well, and just use this as a potential Blood Rush turn for myself here. It's a huge commitment of resources, but I've nullified the threat of Husk breaking naturally anyway. So by doing it this way, you do want to block with at least 1 card in hand, not just throw in Scabskins, because not only does Levia love blocking and sending cards to grave anyway, but specifically if you're going to go for a Blood Rush play this early, you need at least 1 card in graveyard, and that's because Blood Rush is going to discard itself. And then or not discard itself, it's gonna itself's gonna go to grave, and then whatever it discards, so that's gonna add 2 to your graveyard, so it needs at least 1 other card in there to be able to also throw an attack in at the end of the Blood Rush. So I made the call there to not potentially lose Husk, in the hopes that I do get a Blood Rush hand coming at my way, and I knew I would most likely get there, because I kept a blue and then a blue 6 rather, and then another 6. So depending on the draw, it might have messed with me a little bit, but luckily it was the Blue Dread Screamer there, so I have a decent Blood Rush turn coming my way already. And this is fantastic because this is the true turn 1 of the game where Kaylin won't redraw if she blocks. And of course, Blood Rush has the capability of just presenting 18 damage out of nowhere. So it looks like my hand is actually 18 damage as well. I drew into that Boneyard Marauder, so as long as one of those other cards is a blue, I can't quite see. It looks like it's not actually. Looks like it might be a red, red Barraging, red Hungering Slaughter Beast, and the Boneyard Marauder. So I won't get the amazing 18 damage Blood Rush off here, but even if it just comes in for a Claw plus Boneyard or whatever I decide to do, that is going to put me hugely in the lead. Because in theory, if Kaylin wants to keep this whole hand, then she's going to go down to 2 life. So this is a huge commitment of resources on my end still here, because I'm really, really trying to just force cards out of her hand, because this is my only turn in the game where I won't have to play through the Frostbite tax plus whatever hit effect is going to be thrown my way. So I'm going to use Hope Merchants, keep the Boneyard, push in those other 2 cards, try to fish for a blue, because as long as I find a blue, then that's guaranteed turning my 8 damage hand into 13 damage, just if I find a blue. So look at that. I find the blue. Not only do I find a blue, I find an amazing arsenal target as well. So really, really rewarded for deciding to use my resources so aggressively. And sometimes it just does work out that way. The Lexi matchup is a matchup where I think you're favored anyway, so you don't necessarily have to play greedy. But I wouldn't even really call this greedy. I'm just playing with the knowledge that I need to interact with her hand. Otherwise, the tax playstyle is going to potentially actually get to me here, because I did lose Husk so early that there is the chance that a full 5-card hand can just lock me out of the game and start making me take blood debt. So losing Husk forces you to then play more aggressive, because you don't have that extra safety net of being able to pivot mid-game here. So this is a strange game. I wouldn't say most games end up going this way, but what we do see here is kind of the awkwardness of Lexi's ice cards. Most of the ice cards block for 2, so when I present an 18 damage turn and she's forced to block, if those cards are ice cards, then I'm chipping through more damage than I normally would. So that was insane. We saw 2 turns played so far, and already life is 8 to 20. So unfortunately, things really just aren't looking good for Kaylin. This is an explosive start on my end, and the fact that I was able to force cards out of her hand means that I'm really not scared of her potential here to do anything more than just like 1 hit effect, because her ability to pay into Shock Charmers would mean that she will lose the ability to Arsenal, and Arsenaling is more important than proccing Shock Charmers once for Lexi. So that is going to be a Chilling Ice Vein dominated again. However, it's only a yellow Chilling with the blue Weave Ice, so it's only 5, so I really can cover it up if I want with the Scabskins plus 1 card in hand. If we see my hand here, looks like it is an Endless Maw, Writhing Beast Hulk, Fate Foreseen, and then a Reckless Swing. So my graveyard isn't exactly in a spot where I can go for like a Dread Screamer into one of those attacks. Of course, that would require at least 5 in graveyard to start that play. So instead, I'm going to be slowed down in my ability to realistically swing as aggressively as I want to. Now, playing through a Endless Maw means I do need to keep 4 pitch in hand, so that's what I'm doing here. It is still a really strong play, of course, to come in for 9. That is straight up lethal, which is kind of crazy. I mean, obviously Kaylin will block, but that's what I want, right? I want to interact with her ability to keep a full hand. So I banish exactly 3 on this to give the Endless Maw 9. Now, the problem with playing this aggressively, I mean, it was kind of just the nature of the game, is that I'm behind on getting cards into graveyard. I haven't found any recursion pieces to help the fact that my graveyard is going to be very low, and I also used Hope Merchant's Hood, which is my on-demand graveyard fill. So Kaylin always has the opportunity here, if she wants, to just stop attacking and make me take blood debt, but I do believe my blood debt isn't that high right now. It's only at about 4, I think. So really nowhere near the range of I'll actually die. If anything, her just not doing anything means I'll just get a full hand into her again. So that's not necessarily the right play, but it's something to always think about. Now here goes the Frostbite lock once again. Beautiful altered art Frostbite there by a local friend of mine, Hunter. Shout out to him. He altered my Hope Merchant's Hood as well to make it a little more Lovecraftian themed. So really loving what he's done for me here. Thanks again. So Polar Blast coming through, and this of course can force Dominate on the next arrow. And I kind of actually want to refill Grave. So by letting Dominate go through would mean that I only get to put 1 card in graveyard, which is not great, funny enough. So there is a real contemplation here in going ahead and paying for the Dominate. But of course, that does make it a little awkward to still have a play at all, because paying for the Polar Blast would mean I am left with 3 cards in hand, and if I want to block with 2, then all of a sudden I only have 1 left in hand and 1 in arsenal. And a Dread Screamer by itself is really nothing special. So there comes a Cold Wave for 5 Dominate, and that's actually not a hit effect that really matters that much. It's the one that makes your stuff cost 1 more this turn. It doesn't pass through to your active turn, so it's better for when you have defense reactions or something like that. So it comes through. She's going to use the Shock Charmers to push a little bit of extra damage, but we're not really worried about any breakpoints anymore because the Husk is already gone. But the one predicament we are facing is that I don't have 3 cards in graveyard right now to effectively play any of my banish 3s. So instead, that means I'm going to have to go for a slower turn. But we're in a place here where I can play pretty greedy. So I do get to roll Scabskins there just because I like being resource efficient. And I know that I have to overpitch anyway for this Deadwood Rumbler. So with 2 resources floating, that's just already screaming, use me for a Claw Swing. So gonna roll Scabskins. I don't like to do it when it's only 3 damage, but I have to pitch that way anyway. So might as well do it because it's 3 free damage, and we're just so ahead in this game that the free damage is really, really drastic because Kaylin is forced to interact with it. Sure enough, yeah, that Mandible Claw Sling was presenting lethal. I will take a bit of blood debt, but it's really not a big deal. If that blood debt isn't lethal, I would take blood debt for like the next 3 turns, no biggie, to just keep making plays like that. So Kaylin has to just pass into me, which actually right now is really, really good for me because I've already filled up Grave at this point to 4 cards in graveyard. So I've got a little bit of extra padding for whatever I choose to play here. I mean, it's definitely going to be the Dread Screamer to just have a threatening turn. So this is going to definitely hit on the Banish 3, so guaranteed go again. Then it actually looks like the rest of my hand is a red Dread Screamer, a Sink Below, and actually a red Deadwood. So the Deadwood I played last turn was blue, but here we go, I've got the red. So when playing into, or playing off of a hand like this rather, since I'm already presenting 2-card threat on the Dread Screamer, otherwise death, I can follow up pretty safely with just a Mandible Claw swing because it's the same deal. It's either one more card or death. And even if she decides to block with the New Horizons, that's the same deal. It's actually a whole nother card because it's going to blow up Arsenal. So by playing it this way, yes, it's slower, but it's all my hand could really do anyway, and it does let me set up a Dread Screamer in Arsenal to once again have a really strong turn. And the more that these damage breakpoints go my way, it's not even so much that they're breakpoints, it's just that Caitlyn has so many 2-blocks in the deck with all the ice cards. When you're on the aggressive side here, any time that you catch the Lexi player with 2 blocks, they are threatening death. So with only 1 life left, things are definitely pretty much on lock here. If nothing else, I can win through a reckless swing. But of course, the game is probably going to end before that. So she does tax me with the Frostbite and then go ahead and arsenal a card. And that's the issue when Lexi is down to just 1 card. There's really nothing you can do other than, like, I guess if it's a Winter's Bite, you could play that out. But when you toss a card in Arsenal here, it's as good as lost because I'm probably going to force the New Horizons to break here. And that is just going to say goodbye to all those cards. But there's nothing else that she could do with it anyway. That's just the unfortunate part about Lexi. Well, actually, there was a resource available on Tunic, so if that card was a arrow, then yes, it could have been shot. But dawdling on that a little bit too long. What we saw on screen here is that the Scabskins got rolled, and it hit a 6. And of course, this is when Scabskins make sense to roll for just how I normally play. I roll Scabskins when it can equate to 4 damage or more, and it definitely did because that let me play a Dread Screamer first. The other reason to play it there was actually or roll it there was that I was needing a way to fill grave anyway, so there's a chance that depending on what I rolled, I might have been forced to roll Gambler's Gloves, or to pop Gambler's Gloves just so that I could have an attack, but I was rewarded with a second 6, which is just ridiculous. Already hit a 6 this game, and Caitlyn, she's already behind enough. She doesn't need to see this happen, and that is too overwhelming. She's not able to block it out with cards in hand or the equipment available, so we go into game 2. And then what we've got on screen is, once again, Caitlyn with the choice to go first or second, and she's going first, once again, to get that arsenal set up and then perhaps even push through with a dominate. Not sure how great this is going to be. Is it going to be another Carrion Husk threatened on my turn 0? That would just be horrifying. But doesn't quite look like it. It was really the 3 of a kind last game that made it so threatening because the extra cards in hand meant that Shock Charmers could proc a ton. So instead, this is going to come in for 6 total because that is 7 total. Because the Weave Ice on the Blizzard Bolt there. So this is going to be still a huge chunk of damage. And I guess once again, the issue is there where potentially there is the possibility where I could be threatened with losing Husk again. But the Reckless Swing is going to make that basically impossible because by blocking 4 on the 7, I'm going to take 3, which put me at 17. So she would need to deal another 4 damage with Shock Charmers to threaten Husk, which is just not possible with 1 floating and 2 in hand, even if those are blues. She could only proc it 3 times to put me to 14, so pretty fortunate to have the 4 block in hand there, because otherwise I would have been forced to throw in a Scabskins on this attack. Now, this is still a hit effect that's going to punish me pretty heavily. That is 3 triggers now of Blizzard Bolt, so I get 3 Frostbite tokens. Luckily, though, it is turn 0, so I'm going to redraw this hand, and maybe with an extra blue, I'll still be able to swing something into Lexi. So that's what we're hoping for here. The Frostbites are quite the tax, but on an early turn like this, it's not the end of the world because I at least don't have Blood Debt yet, where if the tax forces me down to just swing with Claws, well, I still have plays. So at least I was fortunate enough to have 2 blues to be able to swing the Claws still, but that's going to cost 5 total just for a Claw swing. So yeah, there we go, fix the resource. Coming in for 5 resources for just 3 damage, but at least I have a Sigil, which is going to cycle very well. Let me draw into new cards. And I do get to arsenal and attack here, which would be fantastic if I got a Blood Rush coming my way anytime soon. So pretty decent. I mean, the life lead favors me, which is kind of funny. I mean, it was because of the Reckless Swing that I dealt 2 damage on that turn 1, and then the Mandible Claw is going to deal an extra 3. So life looks strange for, once again, how early in the game this is. But this is the fear. I mean, it's a very different game than how last game went, where when Lexi gets to keep a 5-card hand, this is when the tax effects can get potentially overwhelming. So we might see a Carrion Husk commitment if my hand is going to allow it. But overall, this hand is really nothing too special. I've got the Howl from Beyond, the Boneyard, the Wrecker Rump, and a yellow Hungering here. So my hand is not nearly as explosive as a hand I'd want to protect with a Carrion Husk. So, you know, there's the likelihood here that I might just commit to even paying for the Polar Blast Dominate effect so I can just dump it all into blocking. Wouldn't hate it. I don't have any blood debt yet, and I just didn't really have a great turn anyway. So it could be what we see here. So on the Polar Blast, we've got decisions to make, and it will likely be me paying for Polar Blast. I hope I do. I mean, we've seen Kaylin here commit to a tall attack, so if I let it get dominated, I'm basically saying, yes, I will commit Husk, and that's really not what we want. Not what we want at all. So I'm going to put the card that I value more in the deck back with that Polar Blast pitch, and that's the Boneyard, because I am running Hope Merchant's Hood. So I'd love it if when I Hope Merchants at some point in the game, I would find a Boneyard that is just a higher value card than what the other cards in my hand are. So we can see here, this is going to be quite the tall Cold Wave. Now, Cold Wave isn't one that has an insanely strong hit effect, thank goodness, but it is coming in for 10 total. So that's what Lexi can do when she gets to keep a huge hand, right? And normally this would also be threatening a Shock Charmer's hit effect, but the Cold Wave isn't really one that matters too much. So the issue here is that the Weave Ice did give Cold Wave Dominate, so my tactic of trying to play around and pay with that Boneyard on the Polar Blast just was irrelevant, because now it has the Dominate anyway, so really unfortunate to see how that played out for me here. So this does mean I have to use Husk. Really, because even if I tossed in a 3-block plus Scab Skins, that would only block 5. I would still take 5, and that would put me at 13 right then and there, not to mention whatever other damage can come my way with the Shock Charmers. So really have to Husk anyway. I'm really getting punished for this this play that I made, but at least I can play through 1 Frostbite. It's what I mentioned at the beginning of the video, that you can play through 1 Frostbite pretty easily. I have those 2-cost attackers in the deck. And that's exactly what we've got in hand and in arsenal. I've got the Hungering Slaughter Beast that costs 2, Writhing Beast Hulk that costs 2, so a blue is going to pay through all that. And this is where we see the trade pattern kind of go your way when Lexi tries to keep full hands. If you can still play something, and for Levia it normally means like a 6-power attack, then you do push back damage quite decently into the Lexi player here. Now, I am down the Husk, so I don't get to cover up an arrow for free anymore, but I'm also hoping that one of those insane Invigorate Weave Ice turns just isn't going to happen again necessarily, because there's only the 2 Invigorates in the deck, of course. So she's going to take 2 and lose the Perch Grapplers here, so I'm fine with that. I'm chipping through armor a little bit. Trade is still in my favor. I do have my arsenal, and I really, like I said, value this arsenal because of the Blood Rush plays that it enables. So even if I don't play this arsenal out anytime soon, it is still there for when I find Blood Rush, and at worst case, it can also be played through a Frostbite token as long as I have a blue to still swing 6. So it's really just the ideal arsenal. I'm very happy to just let that sit. Now, Kaylin is going to start off with a 3-of-a-kind, which likely means if she can find a Dominate, which of course we already see with the Polar Blast in Arsenal, then this is going to be potentially arrow that stacks me with hit effects. So this is once again a pretty scary turn. I'm going to go ahead and let her have dominate here though, because the one beauty of playing 3 of a kind really early before playing something like a Weave Ice is that the attack really can't be that tall. And by still having the Scabskins at full 2 block, then as long as I block with a 3 and then the 2 from Scabskins, I'm going to cover up her tallest potential arrow, which is, coming in at 5. So that's what we see here with the Cold Wave coming in for 5. 3 of a kind means she couldn't have played like a Pulse of Volthaven first. She couldn't have played like an Invigorate. So pretty fine with how this is playing out, actually. And my hand here, yeah, it's actually not bad into the choices that I'm being forced into here, because through a Frostbite, I can play an Endless Maw as long as, I keep 1 extra pitch. So that is what I have in hand here with the blue and then 1 extra. So I at least have 9 coming back in, which is super threatening, because if we look at how the turn traded there, Kaylin took damage to keep this hand that didn't actually present, it presented damage, but it didn't push any damage. So I'm going to get to then swing back for 9, and Kaylin is going to have to keep a large hand to have this similar kind of threat again. So we see how the pattern just starts to favor Levia. Once again here, we do see that because of the dominates, I'm a little bit low on cards in graveyard. So I do have a Howl in Banish, which is fantastic for setting up that graveyard when I've got the resources to do it. It is very expensive playing into Lexi that could potentially tax you multiple times, because it's going to cost you like a whole blue to play it through a Frostbite. Funny enough though, if I had 2 blues, I could have played the Howl from Beyond into the Endless Maw here, which would have been 12 damage from that same 3-card hand, and that would have been insane. I mean, poor Ice Lexi. Their blocking is just not that efficient. So there we go, playing through these Frostbite turns pretty effectively. Still set up with that Arsenal card. Pretty much happy as ever. And now we see some of the other ice cards coming through for Kaylin's side. I don't think we've seen a Winter's Bite played yet, but this is one that I don't hate to let it resolve here, because normally there's cards that I don't mind having in graveyard anyway, and here we go, prime example of that. I can just discard a Ghostly Visit, which means even if she comes through with a Dominate attack, I'd got an extra card in graveyard for the turn, so I don't think Winter's Bite is very strong in this matchup, but of course, Kaylin does have to play these things out to free up her arsenals to do other things here, so she might as well. Then if we look at what my hand is going into this turn, by discarding the Ghostly, I'm now left with a Doomsday, a Blue Convulsions, and a Fate Foreseen. And these defense reactions, there's only 2 in the deck, but boy do they suck when you're given a Frostbite on the defense here, right? So now, with the Chilling Ice Vein coming in for 4 total, though, it does free me up to fully cover it with the Fate Foreseen, which is pretty decent. Now, the reason to go for this line is because I need 1 card in graveyard anyway, and this is a way to give me the 1 card in graveyard without taking damage. I could have just let the Chilling Ice Vein hit and discard that way, but by covering up the exact 4, I still get the 1 exact card in graveyard that I need to be able to play the attack that I've been sitting on in Arsenal and have enough banished targets. So the other thing that opens up, right, is by playing the Fate Foreseen on the defense there and paying for it, I now no longer have a Frostbite, so I'm free to roll Scabskins for an extra action point to be able to guaranteed play the Ghostly Visit, because it's one of the 3 cards in my graveyard. So sure enough, I am rewarded on the Scabskins play. I mean, you always roll it there anyway because of the potential for 4, so just getting rewarded for that decision. Now, if it didn't go my way, it's still 6 Dominate, which is a decent turn. By no means is it presenting lethal, so that wouldn't have been great. I mean, if I could push her down to 3, that'd be quite nice. But now we've got instead lethal presented because of my ability to follow up with the Ghostly here. So Scabskins definitely put in a ton of work. And, if I'm rolling Scabskins, then in theory the other line could have been to just take the Chilling Ice Vein damage, go ahead and discard the Fate Foreseen. That way I have 3 engrave, and then try to roll Scabs to be able to play the Writhing Beasthulk into the Doomsday. And that would have presented 2 more damage on the play, but would have put Blasphemfet in play, which is not very ideal for Kalen to kill. However, that line is like incredibly Scabskins dependent, whereas just going for the Ghostly is like a decent reward, but at least I didn't get greedy and take damage to pull it off. So I do think that was the safer line overall. Now, the other good part about how rewarding that last turn was is I'm probably in a position here where the threat that Kalen presents isn't that high, and I'll be able to keep cards to reset my arsenal here. And I haven't seen a Blood Rush this game, right? So my goal is to really, really prioritize putting an attack. Any attack, obviously Boneyard Martyr would be the best, but anything in that arsenal just means my Blood Rush is guaranteed to deal quite a bit of damage. Now, on the reveal of the ice card here, I'm actually going to respond with an instant with the Hope Merchants, and that's because my hand was lacking a way to turn off Blood Debt. I do believe I didn't quite catch. Didn't quite catch exactly what it was, but I think it was like a Wrecker, Sigil, Sink Below, Barraging, something like that. So no way to turn off Blood Debt, so I'm always going to Hope Merchants that. And the main reason to go and do it in this order, where I respond to the ice reveal, is because I don't want to crack the Frostbite on defense, because it just doesn't make sense to do it unless I'm going to pay for defense reaction as well, which I don't have many of, and it's just not likely that I actually want to pop it on defense. If I save it for aggro, it makes more sense because I'm pitching anyway to go ahead and play the attack that I want to for the turn. So I do draw into a much better hand here. I mean, much better is debatable, but at least it does turn off Blood Debt. I've got the Boneyard, the Convulsions, I believe it's a Barraging Beatdown Blue, and then Beast Within. So I don't necessarily have exactly what I want. If I was able to get 2 ways to turn on 2 attacks that turn off Blood Debt, that'd be ideal because I'd play one and set one up in Arsenal. Instead, that's not quite what this hand does. But, with how tight the game is here, Convulsions isn't the worst Arsenal target either, because it at least gives me a Dominate potentially to close out the game if Kalen takes a little bit more damage. So it's okay. It's not ideal, but it's okay. So we see Chilling Ice Vein now coming in, but it is not fused. So I can just take this damage and really not be afraid. Is that ideal? Well, what I'm trying to keep is a way to present threat. And of course, this also means I'm going to be rolling Scabskins because the Ghostly Visit is back and set up. So ideally, my play just becomes the Howl from Beyond into either Boneyard Marauder or Boneyard Marauder, Howl from Beyond, and Ghostly Visit all together. I do have all the pitch for it if that works out. So because my pitch can go places, I don't actually need that Convulsions in Arsenal, so just going to go ahead, block, put another 6 in the graveyard, and fill it with cards that I do not need. I mean, Beast Within, really not doing anything for the most part other than like turn 1, or if you've got Blood Rush, and don't have, that's just not how the game is right now, So then just thinking about on the Scabskins play here, I guess just what to pitch, it really doesn't matter because the play is always going to be roll Scabskins. If I hit only 1 action point, then I can decide whether or not to be really greedy on the Howl, because I do have 2 misses in the graveyard. So if I hit the 1 action point, play Howl, then I could take Blood Debt by playing the Boneyard, but of course if I hit the 2 action points, then I'm guaranteed to be able to turn off Blood Debt, banish 3 here, and then be able to play Howl into Ghostly, which is significantly stronger. So I'm going to keep... Oh, actually, I really did not consider missing on the Ghostly Visit, perhaps, because that is not a play I normally ever go for if the Ghostly isn't guaranteed, so... that was just not ideal. I wonder if in the game I forgot it wasn't actually banished yet or what, because I never like doing that. I don't like rolling if the Ghostly Visit banish is only a maybe, right? Because every roll is a 1 in 6 to just roll a 1, and then that can lose the game if you roll it into another one. So not hugely a fan, to that kind of line. So instead, we'll see what I end up doing with the rest of this turn. That extra action point can go into a claw swing, because honestly, I did pitch the wrong card for this line of play. I mean, if I didn't hit the Ghostly, then I should have pitched the Deadwood first, so that the other card to Arsenal would be a Convulsions from the Bellows of Hell, because that is just significantly stronger in Arsenal than Blue Deadwood Rumbler. Blue Deadwood, garbage in Arsenal. Convulsions, at least it could banish and turn off Blood Debt and potentially present lethal with the Dominate, which, seeing how Kalen's taking the damage, that is probably would have sealed the game. So we're seeing a couple misplays on this last turn. Well, not last turn, but one of the last turns of the game. Now, luckily, my arsenal is my graveyard is in a decent spot here with 2 cards at least. I get to cast the Howl to on-demand refill it to 3, so that's not something I need to worry about right now, which is fantastic. And then Kalen really hurting for a way back into this game. She really needed something better on that 3 of a kind Cold Wave turn. That was where she had all the tempo in the world to potentially start locking me out, but it just did not go that way. Instead, we see the Ranger struggle, where you're behind and you're forced to block, and your turns just don't become anything too threatening anymore. They just become a little bit of attacks and a little bit of damage, and Levia is perfectly fine playing through a little bit of attacks and a little bit of damage. So, very, very favorable position, of course, when you look at the life total 11-1 here. And now we've got Blizzard Bolt coming in for 5. Now, this was unfortunate because with the double red there, Kalen's not going to be able to actually keep anything in hand to Arsenal or fuse with. So that is just a naked 5, and I'm more than happy to take it because it is nowhere near lethal. And look at me, I actually got rewarded by drawing a Convulsions. So even though I really fudged last turn and didn't set things up properly, I do redraw the blue Convulsions here. So I am allowed to banish everything I need to, turning off Blood Debt, resetting that Howl again, and then at minimum I could come in with the Ghostly Visit here for 8 Dominate, which will seal it. So sure enough, this is likely the last swing for game here. Even if Kalen chucks in the New Horizon for 2, the Tunic for 1, and then blocks a 3 block out of hand, that's only 5 on this 8 Dominate. She still takes lethal damage. So that is the game. Kalen gonna look it over, make sure there's no way out, and that is a 2-0 Levia over Lexi. GG's Kalen, it was a ton of fun.